Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I am joined by Chuck Cullion, K0RF, and George Schultz, W0UA. They were recommended by a friend in the ham radio community, and I've got to repeat this line that he gave me. He said, "These guys are doing multi-multi from the black hole of central Colorado." I mean, with that line, I couldn't not reach out to George and Chuck to see if they'd have a conversation. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
So I understand you've known each other for 47 years and that you were ham radio operators at least 47 years ago. And I'm always interested to know how people got started in ham radio. So, Chuck, why don't you start with that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. My dad, W2WPJ at the time, had tried from when I was about 7 years old to get me to get a license. I want you to be the youngest that ever got on the air and so forth. And I couldn't care less. It was just of no interest to me at all. And he tried and finally gave up. Then we moved to California, and down the street there was this antenna up on the roof of this house, and there was this boy there. His name was Tom Liddy, and I said, "What's that thing on the roof?" He says, "Oh, I'm a ham." Um, and I said, "Oh, yeah, my dad did that stuff." And he says, "Yeah, come on, let me show you." And seeing someone my own age doing it just was a totally different experience than watching Dad do it. And I was bitten by the bug, and it's never stopped.
And George, what about yourself?
I was born and raised in a small town in eastern Iowa called Walcott, Iowa, which was about 15 miles west of the Quad Cities, Davenport, Rock Island, etc. And a couple of my father's work associates were hams. And they weren't in a ham industry, so that's kind of weird, but that's how it worked out. And at some point, they suggested to my dad that he had to buy me a little receiver, let me do some shortwave listening. So at age 11, he did that. I had a National NC60 Special, general coverage little SWL receiver. And I dialed all around. And by the way, Walcott, Iowa at that time was population about 550. That's including, domestic pets. And so I was pretty isolated out there, but Dad would take me in, going back to where I was, at some point in my SWLing, which was for a few months, I came across the 20-meter ham band. And good grief, people were talking to each other. This is amazing. And I said, I have to do this. This is an absolute must. I must do this. So thanks to Dad taking me into Davenport to the Davenport Radio Amateur Club, and some of the people there Elmering me up, I got my novice as WN0DGH in July of 1962. And that's kind of where it all started. It took a while, by the way, for me to figure out how to use my DX40 transmitter and get a real antenna up that worked. But at that point, at age 11, it really started, and from age 12, I was licensed. And once you get bit by the radio bug at that tender age, you never lose it. I don't think anybody loses it.
So when I heard 47 years, I somewhat suspected that you guys grew up together, but it doesn't sound like that was the case. When did you intersect?
I had been in California and very active in contesting and all back there. And I wound up making a change of jobs and coming to Colorado and started putting up a station. And of course, I didn't have any operators because they were all out in California. And so I thought, who can I get? Who are the best, the cream of the crop? And of course, George's name popped up immediately. And it took me quite a while to cajole him into coming up and joining. But once he did, he's been here since, and he's been an anchor and a mainstay in our operation. So that's how we got together, and I invited him up along with a bunch of other Coloradans, and we talked about it and decided we're going to do a contest in the fall, and that was how it was.
So to be clear, you've been doing multi-op together for 40 plus years.
Correct.
And several single ops too, and multi twos, or just two people. Chuck and I together have operated and had wonderful success operating together. When we do that, we can get like an old married couple sometimes during the event, but it's been very successful for us and very rewarding, and we've done really well with it, and we laugh about each other and ourselves after the event.
So I don't get a lot of opportunity to ask people how they've seen contesting evolve over nearly 50 years. But since you guys are working together 47 some years ago doing multi-op contesting, how have you seen that niche in the hobby change over that time?
I don't know. This could be the biggest change was when computer logging entered the scene. Prior to that, I had gone to a multi down at KP2A, and this was before computers. And my partner on 40 meters was handing me pencils because I tend to push pretty hard and kept breaking pencils. And he gave me this gift, which was a number 2 pencil. It was about 2.5 feet long, and it said on it, "Break records, not pencils." But you know what? I don't think that I would have stuck with it without the computer logging and the duping. I mean, we'd run a contest and it would take us a week and a half afterwards to get the dupes out, and it just a pain in the neck. So that was a very big thing that happened, and then of course the internet came along and spotting networks, and I mean it's wild. It's fantastic. It's the best computer game going.
I was just going to throw in there, Chuck, that we used to have duping parties. And we get the whole crew together, and we would order pizzas, and we'd go through and audit those logs, thousands of QSOs, queue by queue, and have duping parties when it was all on paper.
I've talked to people that want contests to change, and there certainly are a group of ham radio operators that don't want to see it change. And it's interesting when I talk to people like yourself, you've only seen change over 50 years. It's just been constant change. So what do you think happens with contesting in the future? How do you think it will continue to evolve?
Well, that's a good question. I think that we're seeing a lot more machine control of what's going on, and a lot of new hams and people that have been in the game quite a while are embracing a lot of the digital modes and so forth. And I hope that we'll be able to retain what feels to me like purity of CW. That's about all I do anymore. I don't do SSB because my hearing is really not what it used to be. But I hope CW hangs in there, and when you turn on a contest weekend, it doesn't sound like it's going anywhere soon. What do you think, George?
I think the biggest change, and you basically alluded to it in your remarks, comment, is the cyber influence on radio in general, and certainly on contesting. I think back in the day, what it was about was a big station had big antennas, and lots of them, and putting out big signals. I also think that it was more a matter back in the day, I'm using that, if you will, air quotes, operating-wise, it was a matter of your talent, that you could go a long way on talent. Talent, by the way, on CW included sending your own code, right? And being a CW freak since age 12, a guy who learned CW basically in a day at that age. I miss that. I'm not suggesting that we go back to paper logging and dupe sheets, but I don't know what this limit would be, but I think there's a limit to how far machinery can take over before we're not personally involved, or much less personally involved than we grew up being. And I think that personal involvement is very important. So I just think that the cyber influence and just the things that Chuck mentioned, all of a sudden we have, contest programs, we have band maps and spottings, we have the reverse beacon network. Um, it, all of Chuck's antennas, and there are lots of antennas on that ridgetop, all of the stuff inside, none of that stuff would work to compete in any event without all the cyber stuff. It has to be. You have to be equipped with it. And that's been the difference, I think, over the last 40 years.
Well, I think it's an important thing to note that while there may be, certainly an identification that cyber is changing, the internet's changing how ham radio operators operate, you both have embraced that in order to maintain a competitive station. I want to get into that. Let me go back to that first sentence that I opened with, that you guys are running multi from the quote-unquote black hole of central Colorado. Hopefully it doesn't come across as derogatory. But, I talked to a lot of contesters across the country, and there's certainly this feeling, it's probably accurate, that people in W1 have a certain advantage, probably accurate. People in California is much harder. People, K5ZD, Randy Thompson just announced he's going to be moving to Ohio. He's going to be operating in W8 land. Dan Craig, N6MJ, has been setting records out in Arizona. So the point is, there's this kind of conflictual conversation going on that you can't compete unless you're in New England. But then I meet people like yourself, Dan Craig. I'm sure Randy's going to tear it up in Ohio. Tell me about that. How have you moved forward in that kind of an environment? And I noticed that the ARRL DXCW, you're in the top 5, I think, on 3830 scores amongst K3LR, K1LZ, K1TTT. So you're holding your own. Talk to me about that.
Well, we try real hard, but there are certain things that we can't really deal with, and that's like 2 extra hours of Europe and maybe more each day. And Europe has become the epicenter of contacts. I mean, it used to be where we'd have about half Asia and half Europe. The Asians have become less prevalent, and the Europeans have become more prevalent. So not having a couple of hours each morning when we're running rates of, 400 or 500 on the station, not having those, we're going to lose at least 1,000 contacts. I mean, you just can't get there from here. The rates have been great, and George does a super job. I tell him, okay, here's your opening. This is where you've got to really make it happen, and he'll work that log very hard, and put 500-600 QSOs in our opening time. But that opening time is a couple hours shorter on the front end, and maybe an hour shorter, a half an hour shorter on the far end. And it's just really hard to compete with that. But we compete with ourselves. We're trying very hard to get better. We have the record for the zero call area, and the last entry we had was about 18.5 million. So our goal for this year, for this cycle, and I've already gotten the guys jacked up about it and excited for the worldwide CW. We want to have a clean log over 20 million. So that's where we're headed. That's what we're trying to do.
I'm just going to say that I believe that all of us operators who sit down in a multi operation from here, I think we all know that we're not going to win the contest outright for the USA. It's just not going to happen. And that we can accept that. And I believe it goes back to I have my mythical W0UA's rules of contesting, rules of how to operate contests and how to think about contests. And my rule is you do the best you can with what you have from where you are. Period. Best you can, what you have, where you are. Well, this is where we are, and Chuck has certainly provided the heavy artillery to do some ICBMing from where we are, and we just have to make the most of it. Does that put a lot of pressure on the ops? Absolutely, for sure, it does. And we don't really have it in our laps. And having operated from K3LR 3 times, Chuck and I both, and Timmy's not even really right on the East Coast. He's basically Eastern Ohio, right over the state line. It's an enormous, immense, huge difference. And I've operated from big stations in 5-land also, and it is a big difference. It's huge. We have to accept that, but we're doing this for love, right? In golf, and I'm a golfer, sort of. That might be charitable, but I do enjoy it, playing the game. I just say in golf, there's a saying that's for the love of the game, and I'd say that applies here. This is for the love of the game.
Well, I really appreciate that sentiment, and I don't know if you've watched any of my prior conversations with other contesters or the contest crew, but these guys are all, they're winning contests. Dan Craig, for example. But a topic that comes up a lot is there's different motivations that people have to get involved with the niche. And, a lot of people like myself aren't going to win. It's not my plan to win, but I can measure against my past accomplishments and just remind myself I'm out there to have fun. And the more and more people I talk to, I meet more people that are in that category they're not going to be K0RF, but they're going to have a great time. They might operate portably. I talked to Dean Wood the other day talking about operating contests portably. Some people are taking Caribbean trips. Other people are operating 10 or 11 hours, and they're still having a great time. So I really appreciate what you said about that, George. George, you've mentioned a couple times, you've used the term heavy artillery. I think you said something about the station on the crest or on the ridge, and I want to get into that because I'm really intrigued to know what the station looks like. But I'm even more intrigued to know who you guys operate with and how long those relationships have gone on. And I had a great conversation with Tim Coker and 6WIN a while ago, and he was talking about the importance of putting the right team together and leadership. And I suspect you guys have written a couple books about how to do that well. So, George, why don't you kick that off?
Contesting, I think, I can't tell you what the percentage of licensed amateur radio operators is who are interested in this game, okay? And pursued seriously, it's an extremely demanding game. And so I think that particularly out here in less populated, country here, that the pool of operators is a little less than they might have in like a 5-10 million population, within 100 miles of you, East Coast or West Coast situation. So I think it's more difficult to find people motivated. You come up to Chuck's for a multi, and people are coming up from Denver, people coming up from Colorado Springs. They've devoted their weekend to it, right? They're coming up, they're staying there for the whole weekend, and then going home on Sunday night. So I think to find dedicated, motivated people to operate is maybe a little less easy or convenient for us here. I will say, though, the operators locally, and most of these folks are locals, a couple of exceptions, but most are locals. We don't have big stations. These guys don't have great big stations, but they really love the game. They really want to get into the game and do it in a dedicated, serious way. Chuck and his station provide the vehicle for that, right? And it gets the locals who are serious, dedicated, motivated. It provides a vehicle and a venue for us to all get together and do it, right? It's a great thing, and kudos to Chuck. I mean, Chuck put that station together, and with his drive and motivation, and so it's a big deal. It's a very big deal, and the people who come up are damn well motivated, or they wouldn't be coming up to spend the weekend there.
And Chuck, is that roster staying the same typically year over year, or what does that look like over time?
Well, I'm hoping it will always be the same, but we've had changes. One big change was about 3 years ago. One of my right-hand men, Kurt Andrus, K7NV, passed away, and he was a very big part of the operation. And back in the day, Kurt did a lot of climbing. In fact, did it for a living for a while. And he would come out a week before the contest and help me with the stuff I couldn't get done by myself. And it was just really great. So we lost Kurt, but we've gained some other ops. Let me just kind of run through where we've been for the last few contests. Starting at 10 meters, N0TA and N4VI have been holding down the chairs. And I do have dual setups on 10, 15, 20, and 40, each with their own complete setup, including antennas. So we're able to do in-band QSOs, and they're working together. We have a sequencer so we don't transmit it at the same time and all that good stuff. And so then on 15, we made a change a couple of years ago, and 15 came back because George has won the prize in our outfit of putting QSOs in the log faster than anybody else. So he and W0ZP, who has been operating remotely, is going to come out this fall. I'm so excited. But the two of them are on 15, and KV0Q and K0NR, N0NR, Glenn and Bill have been doing 20, fantastic job there. And NT6X and K0AV and K4EA have been working 40. And I've been hanging on 160 with W1XE doing 80. This year, I'm pretty sure, at least he said he would, AA0RS, our great friend Dave, is going to come out and sit down on 160, and he's a real specialist. So I'll be able to put my efforts into keeping everybody well fed and so forth. But it's a really good group, and that is the kind of the heart of the group that we have right now. And like I say, I hope it doesn't change.
So it sounds like you've had consistency with operators on certain bands over a period of time. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
So when people show up, they know where to sit. They know what the gig is. So from your standpoint, Chuck, I take it you're the team manager, team leader. Give me some insight. Give me some insight into what that looks like for you.
Well, what it looks like for me is to try and be sensitive to what each operator needs. For example, when 10 meters came alive again, I had to put together a 10-meter station, and so I put it together and set it up and brought two ops in to come and do that. And after the contest, I got a kind of an after-action report from N0TA, and he says, okay, but the screen on the monitor is kind of small, and the 5-element multiplier antenna, that rotator ought to be closer to, so I try to adjust the systems so that everybody's happy. On 20 meters, an example of making a change like that to keep our ops happy. I've got a 6/6 array on 20 and a 5/5, and one of those is on each of the two operating positions. And so we've got, let's say the 5/5 is at Asia and the 6/6 is at Europe, and all of a sudden the guy who's been hunting multipliers and doing in the in-band QSOs needs to work in Asian, but his antennas are pointed at Europe, and he doesn't want to turn the antennas. So what we were doing is we nudge the guy in the other chair and say, hey, I'll take your run frequency and you go and work that guy and this and that. So one of the big things that we did is we set up the ability to swap the arrays from one station to the other so that we could very quickly go get somebody. And that was kind of interesting growing pains. After front ends of K3s got blown out about 3 or 4 times, we decided we needed more isolation in those relays. But it's kind of fun, and I try as a technical manager to keep things working and efficient for the guys. And I try to feed them. I go on I'm running back and forth from the kitchen to here. We're starting to get a little bit more kitchen activity out here in the shack area. But I'll be running out, put 2 plates down, and go back, get 2 more plates, and feed everybody, and try to keep the creature comforts, nice for everybody.
So when I think about you guys maintaining a competitive position in K0 in Colorado, I'm hearing you say, you've got a great station, heavy artillery, again, to use George's phrase. You pay a lot of attention to operator feedback and make improvements per station. And you've both mentioned the quality of the operators, not only their skill level, but kind of the consistency over time. What other things could you add to that make a difference there at K0RF?
I think that, I hope, you can only imagine what your approach does. But I hope that the guys feel like they're accepted and appreciated, and I think they're the best on the face of the earth. I could be totally wrong about this, but I think if you put us in another location that had better conditions, we would be very competitive, just like we are from here, and take advantage of some of the differences in the geography and all. I think we've got fantastic guys. They've all done super things on their own, and just I try to make them feel appreciated and welcome.
That this is a venue for people who are, I guess I'll call them serious contesters, right? People who are motivated, skilled, and have the will to get to the big station and be able to get the very most they can from their bands. So I think also, I'll just say this, the upkeep of that station, the complexity of it, and the upkeep, not just of the antennas, but also of the cyber systems. You're dealing with 6 positions here. It is just an Herculean task. It is a major task. And, Chuck spends countless hours just in, I guess, the regular upkeep of that station. But imagine how that ramps up in the month and the week before the contest itself. Because one thing that's really important for these guys who are so motivated to come up there and spend that weekend and do our thing up there, imagine how bad it would be if things didn't work, right? And there's always something that requires repair during the contest. And I'm not even going to try to count here how many times Chuck himself, during the contest, and he's been operating all night, and something goes wrong on Saturday morning, and he goes crawling up 120 feet up the 20-meter tower to the upper 20 to fix it. That's happened a lot of times. So, yeah, I think it's a matter of dedication that is reciprocated between the ops and between Chuck as the station owner.
Let me add that upkeep and that improvement factor for the station is definitely not all me. There are a couple of guys who really have contributed. One is George Noyes, W1XE, and he's the kind of guy, he's the kind of brilliant engineer that if I can imagine something, he's got it on my table in a week. And he has just, our sequencers for CW, our relay changeover between the stations with 100 dB plus isolation between ports, and just I can't even remember all the things that he's done, but I know, and if I don't call him for a month, he'll say, he'll call me and say, "Well, do we need anything?" So he's just been great. And then, of course, with let's see, 4, 6, 8, 10 K3s. We have problems with those occasionally, and problems with the amplifiers. We've got 10 amplifiers going, and all of the rotator equipment. Stuff goes wrong with that. And when I have time, I'll dig into it and put my, let's say, 70th percentile troubleshooting ability to work. But if I am too busy,
90%.
if I am too busy or I can't figure it out, Dave, AA0RS, is fabulous. I'll call him and say, "Gee, this isn't working, and I'm measuring such and such a voltage." He says, "Bring it out here, mate." So
Yeah, he's British, by the way. He has that British accent.
So I'll put it in the car, we go out there, and we have a wonderful time while he demonstrates his 100th percentile troubleshooting ability. That guy can fix anything. So I've got a lot of
I've made a
help.
few. Hey, Chuck, I've made a few trips up there too.
Yeah. Well, I haven't gotten to the outdoor stuff we've done out there. One other thing is with all the cyber stuff, I'm pretty limited. Okay, most of the stuff didn't exist when I started, and K4EA Neil has really helped out tremendously with that. Finally, one other person that's been instrumental in helping us, and he's just a great guy, is W2FU, Jeff. Jeff has helped me to get all of our rotating systems and our remoting systems set up, and I can call him any time of the day or night, and he always has time for me to help me figure it all out. Then the outside stuff, all the antenna stuff, I don't like to climb without George there, because he's the guy who will figure out what I need before I know it and get it out there and have it ready to go. And he's just been, stalwart. He's been with me every time from the beginning. So it's not a one-man job, that's for sure.
So you've both mentioned that you're CW guys. So it begs the question, does all that artillery remain silent during a phone contest?
Most of the time.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that we were both phone guys. One of the reasons that Chuck recruited me when he did in 1977 was because he had just moved here, and I don't think he'd moved into his home yet. And but being Chuck, he was in a motel or something, a hotel, and he strung a wire and he listened to me win the 1976 phone sweepstakes and set a record for that event on high power at that time. And that's into 77. It was when that recruiting effort on his part started. I was a phone guy, not a phone guy. My opportunities up to that point had primarily been on phone, and I really enjoy phone. I always have enjoyed phone, but I don't. For some reason, I've gotten away from it. I've been almost entirely a CW guy. Chuck, what about how would you compare what I'm saying? All of a sudden, I'm a CW guy, and I'm not a phone guy.
I don't think it's all of a sudden, but let's say that you've emphasized that portion that you've always been doing. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I don't hear that well, and the voices and the frequency ranges that you need to be able to decode what somebody's saying, I have trouble understanding my wife, let alone some accent coming from Eastern Europe. So anyhow, I kind of watched George. I learned a lot about CW from George.
I think, Chuck, that I kind of made you a CW guy more than you were before you came
Yeah,
here. You agree?
I think so. And I really love it, and it's great. And I've tried to learn all of the new techniques, the 2BSIQ and so forth, and I've used that and enjoy doing it. So yeah, I migrated. When I, let's see, probably back in, good grief, I don't remember, 67 or something like that. I came in second from the West Coast in CQ Worldwide Phone. So that I was very active on phone in those days. But it's just kind of faded away. It's not as much fun for me. And like I say, I'm not hearing that well.
One thing I think, if I can just throw this in, CW is such a clean mode. It's so much cleaner than phone. And I find the purity, I guess, I'm using clean, but somehow the purity of CW. Also, I think CW requires an additional cognitive skill, right? Because we have to decode the CW. And on phone, we're just talking to each other like we're talking right now. But CW is another level of skill. And for those of us who love it and have mastered it, it feels good to use it well.
So between the two of you, you've got over a century in this hobby. It's remarkable. And I think I'd be making a huge mistake in not asking you where you think ham radio goes from here, how we can encourage more young people to get involved with the hobby, and then how do we encourage more people to pick up contesting? A lot of questions there, but Chuck, want to take a stab at it?
Yeah. Well, I think that reality is demonstrating that modes like FT8 and other digital modes seem to be attracting most of the newcomers. And so if we're saying ham radio for the sake of the brotherhood of the hobby, I think continued efforts in those directions are probably going to swell the numbers more easily than in the old days. You go get a license manual and you study your head off and listen to paper tapes of code, to get involved. There was a lot of work and a lot of effort that you had to put out to be able to join the club, so to speak. And unfortunately, it seems that with the busy lives of our young people, they don't really have a lot of time to put into that. I'm also a volleyball coach, by the way, and so I see a lot of young people, and there still are people who are willing to work their tail off to get into something that they don't know how to do. But so I'm not saying it doesn't exist anymore. I'm just saying that I think there are an awful lot of things that are available just by a mouse click, and it's a little harder. It's a little tougher to join the ranks if you have to go and study it and work it hard up front to get a novice license to get started, so to speak. So if we're going for just numbers and we're saying, okay, we're going to totally accept the evolution, which may be the end of some of the things that we've thought about, it seems to me that the facts are saying that the digital revolution is probably the direction that the hobby is going.
I would like to be optimistic about the future of amateur radio. And I think that it's easy to base, we've grown up through, as you mentioned, Kevin, at the outset, really all of the changes that have occurred over more than a half century, right? And so we have fond memories of how radio was as we came up through it. And unfortunately, however, I'm not optimistic about the future of amateur radio in general. Now, I could put an asterisk on that and say, as we have known it, which is where Chuck pretty much went with that, right? Not as we've known it. So that's all very subjective, but, we have maintained this love for this hobby as we've known it for all our lives. And I think I think Chuck is correct that the future of radio probably is ham radio is moving toward a digital. We're moving toward a digital future. Really quick example. When I was a junior in high school, one morning I got on with my Drake TR3 and my little vertical in the backyard, and I worked a UA0. Got up early before school, and I worked a UA0, and he was on Sakhalin. And it was about a mile walk to school. And as I'm walking to school in this little town, I'm saying, man, I'll bet I'm the only guy here who's talked to somebody in Sakhalin today, right? And maybe this week or this month. How cool was that? Really a neat feel to it. Here, I'll just dial up a number in Sakhalin and talk to him right now.
Ain't that the truth?
So, I think, and by the way, I'm not thrilled that the future of radio might be digital. I think that human personal involvement, I think QSOs should only be counted if there's personal involvement in the QSO, not a machine talking to a machine. So I'm not optimistic about it. And in fact, if we listen to the bands today, during an average weekday, you're going to find a lot of empty real estate in the CW portions of the bands in particular. On a contest weekend, it blossoms and blooms. It's wonderful. But this is a demographic thing, too. We can't leave demographics out of this. I'll be 75 in September, and Chuck will be, 82?
83 in a couple of weeks.
I missed a year there. I think that radio, as we have known it, is going to die with us, unfortunately, and it's very difficult to predict how far into the cyber realm it's going to get. We're an instant gratification society, and being really dedicated to ham radio is not necessarily an instant gratification sort of thing. It takes work.
Are either of you encouraged by what you see with Parks on the Air? Because I guess when I look at Parks on the Air and the phenomenal success and how people are operating, and this isn't to say that I disagree with you about FT8 and then move toward digital, but I've watched this community. It was part of the hook that got me back involved a couple years ago. And, they're grabbing equipment that is more affordable. They're running out to a park. They're learning to set it up. A lot of them start on phone, but I know a lot of people in the program that learn CW through that process. There seems to be, at least from my perspective, some of that youthful perspective that I remember from back in 1979, 1978 when I first got licensed. I guess the question is, do you see any encouragement from that group?
Yes, I definitely do, and I was remiss in not mentioning that we have a new, younger operator, W8XAL, who joined the team a couple years ago, and when he joined the team, the best that we could do is to have him sit and listen in another set of headphones and say, oh yeah, I sort of see what you did there when you typed that in the computer, too. With Parks on the Air, he does it almost every day, and he's gotten to where he can, run a pile up at 30 words a minute. It's fabulous, and I credit the Parks on the Air, and as I mentioned, there are young people who are willing to put in the effort and do it, and he's one of them. So yes, I'm definitely encouraged by that.
Before we wrap up, are there any final things either one of you would like to add?
Well, I'm very happy that you took the time to talk with us about this, and we're very excited. It's not getting any less. Keeping the energy up. Hope to be going for a long time to come, and I'm thrilled to have the team that I have, and I'm hoping they'll be with me and still excited, and I try to keep them going that way.
My name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. I've been talking to Chuck, K0RF, and George, W0UA. I'm sure you'll hear them on the next contest, and hopefully we'll all reach their skill level at some point in our ham radio careers. Have a great day, guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Kevin.